Hello, Congressman. Good to have you this morning.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Scott.
Hey, I know you're in D.C., but you've probably had some reports from home. How did the moisture drop? A bunch of the last few days in western Oklahoma.
Well, I think in my immediate home area, we got about an inch of rain, which the wheat needed. Like everything else weather-wise in Oklahoma, there's not a consistent pattern, but really it's been a pretty decent last few weeks. The wheat's in the ground, the wheat's up. Those of us who are spring calvers are getting ready to wean and sell calves pretty soon, and life's always better when you make your payment to the banker.
Well, that's for sure. Hey, I wanted to before we start, I wanted to mention somebody that was close to friends of all of us. I remember back in 1993. There may be some current parallels, but which I think at the time you were probably pretty close to the back of the building whenever you decided to run for an open seat for Congress. And there was a leader in the House of Representatives by the name of Leonard Sullivan, who was a dear friend. And I remember Leonard saying to me, when I was asking about the race, he goes, "Well, I don't know if Frank can win, but I'm with him. I'm going to support him all the way." And what happened in 1993, I can't believe you've been there that long. You still look like you're a kid. But nonetheless, that was a bellwether for a change in the Congress back in 1993 when you won that. Nobody, listen, I know you and your family did and some others, but that was an upset to most people in the country. You've been there. That was a bellwether. Your thoughts about where we're headed today? Do we see it? Do we see any elections coming up where the election would present a new Frank Lucas or somebody that would say, "All right, this is where things are trending"?
Most of the political pundits would tell you, Scott, that this gubernatorial race out in Virginia is a nip and tuck battle between where we go next. It's will be a statement about so far the Biden, Pelosi, Chuck Schumer handling of the national government. Since the Democrats have total control, it seems to be absolutely neck to neck. Joe Biden carried it by 10 points over Donald Trump last year in the presidential contest. So it is one of those bellwether issues. You mentioned the special election back in 1993 that led to my being sworn in May of 1994. Actually, it started the campaign in 93 and the election and filing all was in 94. When I came to Congress, the Democrats had controlled the United States House for 40 straight years. And my district had been held by a Democrat for 19 straight years. So when I won, not only did I surprise the national political pundits, as I always tell people, but I think I amazed my mother-in-law and my wife both by winning. So I very much appreciate your thoughts about how important that was in the past. But right now, we are on the verge of potentially, I think, if things stay on their present course, another dramatic change election-wise next year in 2022. The Dems have put forth their giant package to change America. Bernie Sanders wrote the initial draft in the Senate Budget Committee. Bernie, the socialist who sits as a member of the Democrats, who's the chairman of the Senate Budget Committee, $6 trillion. The House realized they couldn't come up with $6 trillion in new spending. By the way, that's real money. So they cut it back to $3.5 trillion. And now over the course of weeks and a couple of months, it's shrunk perhaps to $1.5 trillion. It might be $1 trillion. Speaker Pelosi says every day that just 2 or 3 days from now, we're going to have a draft of the bill. They can't get it pulled together in a country where people want something to happen, not being able to do anything. I may get to be Science Committee chairman in the next term of Congress.
Perfect segue. I want to get into the Science Committee. You called it your term about the committee. Go ahead and tell our viewers.
It's one of the few fun committees left in the United States Congress. I'm a past chairman of the House Agriculture Committee. I did the 2014 Farm Bill. I've served on financial services for almost my entire tenure, the banks, credit unions, the cost of capital, that kind of thing. But the Science Committee, that I'm now the lead Republican on, ranking member, would be chairman if we were the majority. That's the fun committee, Scott. We have jurisdictions over the National Science Foundation, all the research money that the public spends on trying to develop new technologies and new breakthroughs, the kind of things that then private industry takes that pure research and turns it into applied and makes our life better. But we're also the National Weather Service. Think of that wonderful facility down in Norman, Oklahoma. Anyone who lives in the Southwest and most assuredly Oklahoma understands how important knowing what the weather's going to be is, because we're Aggies and we're energy producers, critical information. We're also the Department of Defense civilian energy programs. Think about fusion power. Think about cleaner, more efficient natural gas. Think about those kind of things. The civilian side of the Department of Energy. And last but not least, we're NASA, the space programs. And while that might not seem like a natural fit from somebody from Oklahoma, let me tell you, that is the next frontier. And that's one of those places where to keep up with and stay ahead of, more importantly, our competitors on the other side of the Pacific, we have to go back to the moon. We have to go on to Mars. We cannot let a totalitarian society, and I'm not referencing the United States, we cannot let a totalitarian society on the other side of the Pacific that right now is aggressively bullying all their neighbors control the off world. That cannot be allowed. So I have the fun committee, I have the challenging committee, and it leads us into our other little subject too, I think, Scott.
I'm watching what you're doing in Congress, what you personally have done, your personal appeal, vaccines. Now, you've been very clear about where you're at with vaccines, and we're getting into flu season. There's a lot to unpack on this particular one. Let's start with your particular personal attitude towards the COVID vaccine. There are a lot of things happening this week. FDA committees are saying, or some of the review committees are saying, hey, let's go 5 to 11 for children. There's a lot to unpack here. Give us an idea about where you think we are in vaccine uptake. And frankly, communications by CDC and FDA have not been great. I think that's an agreement across the board.
Atrocious. First off, I think, Scott, it's worth noting, and let's just discuss this up front. I'm not in favor of mandatory vaccines. I don't believe the government should have the authority to force anyone to be vaccinated. Vaccines are one of those things, whether it's COVID-19 or everything from polio to rubella, measles, mumps, even the shot that your doctor or nurse gives you when you have to have stitches to make sure you don't have tetanus. Remember old lockjaw, the phrase they used in the old days? Vaccines are a critically important part of our life. So I'm not mandatory. I think we should all think it through, rationally make the right decision. In my point of view, the right decision is being vaccinated, whatever it is. Why have the disease when you can take a vaccine and not get sick? Now, some will say the vaccines are not perfect. Well, no vaccine's perfect. I haven't found anything yet in the world that is perfect, but they provide an amazing level of protection. Now, that said, where are we at? When President Trump was in office and the COVID-19 scourge came at us, I suspect from the other side of the Pacific, but ultimately that will be figured out. When it came at us, we had to have a response. As a kid, I listened to my grandparents and great aunts and uncles talk about the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918 and 1919, how it literally brought life in Roger Mills County, Oklahoma, to a stop for a month, 2 months, and how it killed young, healthy men and women, and how it absolutely slaughtered pregnant women and little kids. I mean, their stories were almost outlandish as a kid. Now, fast forward a century ahead. When COVID-19, the scourge rolled in, we were seeing those kind of infection rates. It was spreading rapidly. President Trump, give the man credit, stepped up and made the initial push to spend the resources to develop a vaccine. And we started down the process of maybe as many as 20 or 25 different vaccines. We wound up with 3 very effective vaccines now. He also is the person who pushed to spend the money by the federal government to build the factories in a hurry to mass produce the vaccine. He was the one who was supportive of making the vaccine free and available to everyone in the United States. So this is a Trump vaccine, first and foremost. That said, it is proven to be impressively effective. I've been fully vaccinated with Pfizer. My wife has been fully vaccinated with Moderna. I have staffers who've had the Johnson & Johnson. If you look at where we are now in Oklahoma, Scott, the good news, of course, is 58% of eligible Oklahomans are now fully vaccinated. Thank goodness. But there's some bad news too, Scott. According to the State Department of Health, for every 10 people who are hospitalized with every 10, 8 of them were never vaccinated. 8 of them. that could be dramatically reduced. And if you look at the federal numbers nationwide, 25% of the intensive care unit beds, that's where we provide maximum health care. You are super sick when you go to the ICUs. 25% of the ICU beds in this country are occupied by COVID-19 patients. And if that's not enough, you look at the state CDC numbers for Oklahoma, over 10,000 of our fellow citizens have died from COVID-19 in this pandemic. We're past 600,000 Americans who've died, and 500,000 of those died before we had a vaccine. So the vaccines are critically important. They've been developed in the most public sort of ways. Even President Trump has had the vaccines. I've had them, but I'm not a person who says you have to be vaccinated. People need to take those smartphones and look it up, do their research, Scott. I interact with the public in a very cautious fashion now for the last year and a half with COVID issues. But the comments I get from people that vaccines will melt your DNA, they're full of chips to track you, it'll make you docile, it'll cause you to stick to the refrigerator door when you walk by. I mean, Scott, good grief. Good grief.
Yeah, it's different. Let me ask you about one more question on this particular topic,
Please.
And thank you for being frank about this. Your committee, or the science committee, I've watched, and on Monday night we do a doctor's program, 4 of the premier doctors in Oklahoma. Been doing this for 19 months now, and one of the things that they consistently complain about is CDC and FDA sending confusing messages. And now these are doctors. Dr. Armitage of the Oklahoma Blood Institute. I mean, you can't even say the word Anthony Fauci around him without him going ballistic. They really believe this is the major failure during this pandemic, was terrible, terrible messaging. Your thoughts about where, as the committee looks at this, where you're headed in the future so that this is not repeated again?
First off, I agree with the medical community in Oklahoma. This was clumsy, sloppy, it was awkward, and it has cost lives. When we ultimately get to the bottom of all of this, I think we're going to find that bad decisions were made based on the pressing complications of the day. You remember, we were initially told no need to wear a mask. Then we were told everybody must wear a mask. That was an example. I suspect, Scott, when we get down to the bottom line, is that there wasn't sufficient mask available at the beginning of the pandemic. And someone, I'm not pointing my finger at anyone particular, made the decision that since we can't protect everyone with a mask, then let's just not do any mask PR wise. That was a mistake. We should have been honest and upfront and said, if masks help, we only have X number of masks for so many 100 million Americans. Here's how we're going to allocate them out. We should have been upfront and honest. And then the conflicting discussions about the quality of this vaccine or that vaccine, and the conflicting stories that circulate around it. The leadership at CDC, the leadership and the White House, for that matter, should have been more consistent and precise, calm and rational in putting it forward. We live in a world with these mass communication devices, the smartphones, and it's hard enough to keep malicious, mischievous people from fear-mongering and spreading gossip, but we could have done a better job in the federal government and the national health community of alleviating these fears just by being honest. Tell people the truth. I mean, truth sometimes is painful, sometimes it's ugly, sometimes it's scary, but you got to tell them the truth, Scott. I believe most people will make good, rational decisions when they have enough accurate facts to form a decision. But in this case, there was so much confusion, so much cross-reference, so much inconsistency. How could people make a rational decision when they didn't have enough rational information? But we'll get to the bottom of that, not only in the science committee, but I suspect Energy and Commerce, I suspect Ways and Means, a number of other House committees will lay into this, because we can't go through the kind of environment we've gone through in the last year and a half. It's been dangerous for our national health, but it's also created suspicion and lowered the quality of the national dialogue amongst all of us, and elected officials too, for that matter.
last, I know you're busy, and we're getting into that season where families get together, people come indoors. A pretty good cold front coming through Oklahoma pretty soon. People are, last year was not a big flu season. I know that's a concern of yours. And second of all, as we start getting together for this Thanksgiving, we're still watching those giant tankers off the port of LA and Savannah, can't get unloaded. Food prices are going to be high. Your background, and as one of the people that feed America, your thought about getting flu shots before Thanksgiving, and also what we're facing in terms of energy challenges, food challenges. There's some real clouds on the horizon out there, Congressman.
Again, I can't make anyone get any kind of a vaccination. Although as a farmer, a parent, a grandparent, my livestock, my children, my grandchildren, myself have been vaccinated for everything. Again, why have a disease if there's ability to prevent it or reduce the severity? Get vaccinated. Get your flu shot. You should do it in your own best interest. We were lucky last year in a sense because in the trauma of COVID-19, the amount of hand sanitizer that was used and the face masks and better sanitation, it helped suppress traditional flu as it helped suppress COVID-19. So continue those, but get your vaccination. The supply chain issues. We're so jammed up at the ports. We have labor issues. We've all got all manner of problems. We have to work our way through these things. The ship, so to speak, Scott, will right itself, but we've got a little bit of a wild ride ahead of us because remember, for months last year in 2020, literally the economy in the country shut down. In the old days, when I was a kid, we had a system by which, whether it was groceries or automobiles or just about anything, we had major warehouses everywhere piled full. Over time, we've developed this just-in-time delivery model, which makes the ultimate consumer good the cheapest possible price because there's the least cost to get it there. But when you have a just-in-time delivery system and you have a hiccup in the supply chain, then it sets off these gyrations. We'll overcome this. Take a deep breath. Still enjoy your turkey or your roast beef or your baked chicken or whatever you have at that family gathering. Still, I believe, have the family gathering. It would be nice if everyone is vaccinated who goes to the family gathering. And if you fall in the eligible group to get a booster shot, I do, and I've had a third shot of Pfizer, get your booster shot, wash your hands, use your hand sanitizer, cough into your handkerchief, wear your mask if you're around relatives that you've not been around for a while. Be careful. Just be careful. If you don't care about yourself, think about your parents or your children or your grandchildren, your aunts and uncles, your cousins, your neighbors, the people down the street who might have a compromised immune deficiency system. Don't assume that you're going to have a mild case and then risk them who cannot biologically protect themselves from a severe case. Don't let something happen to your neighbor or your family or your friends. Just be careful and thoughtful.
Congressman, thanks for those words. Thanks for giving us an update on what's going on up there. Let me ask you, I said as my last one was the last question, so I sort of windy, but when do you think that we're going to see like definitive action on the Build Back Better, the infrastructure, all of those bills? It's very confusing on this end to figure out when any of this stuff's going to be there for an up or down vote.
The Democrats cannot agree among themselves. They have a bare majority. Nancy has 3 more Republicans right now in the House, Democrats, I should say, in the House than Republicans. Mr. Schumer has 2 more Democrats. I mean, it's a bare majority everywhere. I think they move something. I think they move something in the next 30 days or 6 weeks. But Build Back won't be $6 trillion. It might be $1 trillion. It might be $900 billion. There will be an infrastructure package, roads, bridges, and highways. But one of the battles we're having here is if you want to do lots of social welfare spending and you're calling it infrastructure, that's not right. People pay user fees when they buy gasoline, diesel, airport tickets to have better roads, to have better bridges, to have better harbors, better ports, so that supply chain will work more efficiently. They've got to get their infrastructure package back to where it's really infrastructure. It'd pass overwhelmingly if it was really roads, bridges, railroads, ports, airports. But it's going to take them some time to figure that out on the other side.
Congressman, thanks, Frank Lucas. Thanks very much for being with us today. Just really enlightening on a lot of the things that are happening. We're a long way away from Washington. We've got Alex Cameron there, which is great.
He's great.
For that. Yeah, he really is. And appreciate you being here. Hope we talk again soon.
We will visit again soon. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, sir.